The girl was 12, maybe 13. No one had ever bothered to write her exact age down anywhere, and she had stopped trying to remember it herself. Every morning before the city fully woke up, she tied her hair with the same faded ribbon, slipped on shoes that didn't match, and walked toward the garbage dump at the edge of town, where the smell of rot mixed with smoke and silence. This place scared most people, but to her it was survival. She moved carefully between broken glass and twisted metal, her small hands trained to recognize what could be sold and what would cut skin. Bottles, wires, scraps of copper. Each item meant bread, maybe milk, maybe one extra meal for her younger brother who waited at home. That morning felt heavier than usual, the sky low and gray, the dump unusually quiet. As she bent to pick up a crushed plastic bottle, she heard a sound that didn't belong there. A cough, rough and painful, followed by a weak groan. She froze, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. People didn't come here unless they had no choice, and even then they didn't lie still. She took a step back, fear pulling at her feet, telling her to run, to disappear. Then she saw movement beneath a pile of torn cardboard and dirty cloth. Slowly, cautiously, she lifted one corner and gasped. A man lay there, unconscious, his face bruised, his lips cracked, his clothes torn but once expensive, now soaked in filth. He looked completely out of place, like someone dropped from another world. She had seen drunk men before, injured men, but this was different. His breathing was shallow, uneven, like it might stop at any moment. For a long second, she did nothing. Her mind screamed that this wasn't her problem, that she was just a poor girl with no power to help anyone. But then the man stirred, his fingers twitching weakly, and something inside her broke open. She knelt beside him, ignoring the dirt soaking into her dress, and touched his arm. It was hot, feverish. Her hands shook as she pulled more cardboard away, trying to let him breathe. His eyes fluttered open for a second, unfocused and glassy, and he tried to speak, but only managed another cough. She remembered the small bottle of water tucked into her bag, the one she had planned to drink later to save money. Without thinking, she unscrewed the cap and gently lifted his head, letting a few drops touch his lips. He swallowed slowly, desperately, like someone rescued from drowning. Tears burned her eyes, though she didn't know why. She whispered that it was okay, that he would be fine, even though she had no proof and no plan. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the dump, and flies gathered, buzzing around them. She waved them away for hours, sitting there instead of going to school, counting time by the ache in her legs and the fear in her chest. People passed in the distance, but didn't come close. No one wanted trouble. At one point, she thought he had stopped breathing and panicked, shaking him gently until he groaned again. When he finally woke more fully, his eyes searched her face in confusion. He tried to push himself up and failed, pain twisting his features. She told him not to move, her voice soft but firm, surprising even herself. He whispered a name, Victor, and then asked where he was. She told him the truth, not knowing how else to answer. His face tightened with shock and disbelief, and then exhaustion pulled him back down. She covered him with cardboard again to shield him from the sun, sitting like a guard beside him, her small body casting what little shade it could as afternoon bled into evening. Doubt crept in. What if he died? What if people blamed her? What if helping him ruined the little life she had managed to hold together? Her stomach growled, her head ached, but still she stayed. When he woke again, he was clearer, frightened but conscious, and she helped him stand, leaning his weight against her thin shoulder. Each step toward the road felt impossible, yet somehow they made it. That single morning, in a place built on waste and abandonment, became the moment everything quietly shifted, though neither of them understood it yet. The small clinic smelled of antiseptic and old paint, a sharp contrast to the stench of the garbage dump that still clung to their clothes. The girl sat on a hard plastic chair in the hallway, her feet dangling above the floor, hands clasped tightly around the torn sack that held her collected scraps. She felt out of place, invisible and exposed at the same time, flinching every time a nurse walked past. Inside the examination room, voices murmured, serious, urgent words she didn't fully understand, but she caught phrases like head injury, severe dehydration, and lucky to be alive. Each word pressed heavier on her chest. She wondered if she should leave before someone asked too many questions, before they realized she had no parents, no address, no permission to be here. Still, when the door opened and the doctor asked if she was family, she stood up without thinking and said yes. The word felt strange on her tongue, but it was the truth in the only way that mattered. Victor regained consciousness later that night, his head wrapped in bandages, machines humming softly beside him. The girl was allowed in for only a few minutes, yet those minutes changed something between them. He looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face, like he was afraid it might disappear if he blinked. He thanked her in a hoarse whisper, his voice heavy with emotion, and she shrugged it off awkwardly, embarrassed by his intensity. She told him her name at last, speaking quickly as if it didn't matter, then added that she needed to go home to her brother. His eyes widened with concern, and for the first time she saw fear in someone who looked powerful even lying broken in a hospital bed. Over the next few days, she came back after school, sitting in the same chair, bringing him small things she could afford: an apple, a folded paper with a drawing her brother had made, silence when he needed rest. He listened when she spoke, really listened, asking about her life without pity, without shock, just quiet attention that made her feel seen. On the fourth day, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Men in dark suits filled the space, their faces tense, eyes scanning everything. The girl shrank back, instinct telling her that people like this brought trouble. When Victor saw them, relief and anger crossed his face at the same time. They crowded around his bed, talking fast, apologizing, explaining about being attacked, robbed, left for dead. The word millionaire slipped out, spoken like a title, and the girl froze. She stared at Victor, suddenly seeing him differently, her mind struggling to connect the injured man she had guarded from flies with someone who belonged to a world of money and power. She stood up slowly, ready to slip away unnoticed. Before she could, Victor called her name. The room fell silent as he told them she had saved his life. Cameras appeared almost instantly, flashes of light blinding her, voices asking questions she couldn't answer. Victor raised his voice for the first time, commanding them to stop, to give her space. He placed himself between her and the chaos, his hand steady on her shoulder. After that day, nothing felt simple anymore. The girl returned to her small room at the edge of the city, but the world there felt smaller, like it was already slipping behind her. Victor insisted on seeing her again before he was discharged, promising it would only be to say goodbye. Instead, he asked to meet her brother. When Victor arrived in a quiet car that didn't belong in their neighborhood, the girl felt ashamed of the peeling walls and broken door. But Victor stepped inside without hesitation, kneeling to her brother's level, listening to his stories like they were important. He didn't offer money that day. He offered respect. Over the next weeks, he kept his word and returned, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. He arranged medical checkups, helped her brother enroll in school, and made sure they had food without making them feel like beggars. She remained cautious, waiting for the moment it would all vanish, because good things always did. The truth of Victor's life unfolded slowly. He told her about his wealth, his loneliness, the enemies money had brought him, and how close he had come to dying unseen and unloved among trash. He admitted that her kindness had forced him to see the world he had ignored. For the girl, the realization was dizzying. She had grown up believing that people like her were invisible, replaceable. Now, a man with everything treated her like the most important person in the room. She began to understand that her life had crossed into a path she never imagined, not because of luck, but because she had chosen compassion when it was easiest to walk away. The changes did not arrive like a storm. They came quietly, almost carefully, as if afraid she might send them away. At first, Victor simply made sure the girl and her brother were safe. A small apartment replaced their crumbling room, its walls clean, its windows letting in real light. The girl slept on the floor the first night, unable to trust the softness of the bed, listening for sounds of the dump she had known all her life. In the mornings, she still woke early, her body trained by years of survival. But instead of walking toward garbage and smoke, she walked to school with a backpack that felt too new, too heavy with possibility. Victor never pressured her to call him anything special. He didn't ask for gratitude. He simply showed up. Sometimes he picked her up himself, dressed simply, without guards, and asked about her day as if her lessons and worries mattered more than meetings and money. She watched him closely, waiting for the moment his kindness would crack and reveal a hidden price. It never came. At school, the difference was immediate and painful. Other children noticed her clothes, her books, the way teachers suddenly paid attention. Whispers followed her down the halls. Some said she was lucky. Others said she didn't deserve it. The girl learned quickly that change could be as isolating as poverty. On days when it became too much, she sat quietly during lunch, remembering the dump, reminding herself where she came from so she wouldn't feel like a stranger in her own skin. Victor noticed the shift in her silence. Instead of lecturing her, he told her stories about his childhood, about growing up with money but without warmth, about rooms full of people where no one really saw him. She realized then that wealth had not protected him from loneliness any more than poverty had protected her from pain. That understanding tied them together more tightly than any promise. One afternoon, Victor asked her to show him the place where they had first met. She hesitated, embarrassed, but agreed. When they arrived, the smell hit him hard, and for a moment she thought he might turn back. Instead, he walked deeper into the dump, his expensive shoes sinking into dirt and waste. She showed him where she used to search, where she had found him, half buried and broken. Victor stood there for a long time, saying nothing. The girl watched his face as memories surfaced: fear, shame, gratitude, resolve. He told her that waking up there had stripped him of every illusion he had about control and importance. He said that if someone like her could survive here with dignity, then he had no excuse for ignoring it. That day, an idea was born, though neither of them fully named it yet. Weeks turned into months. Victor began funding small changes around the area: clean water stations, safer recycling points, fair payment for materials. The girl watched people she once knew from the dump stand straighter, work without fear, earn enough to feed their families. She helped translate their needs to Victor, her voice steady, her confidence growing. For the first time, she felt useful in a way that didn't cost her health or dignity. At home, her brother laughed more, slept better, dreamed bigger. He talked about becoming a teacher, a doctor, someone who helped instead of survived. The girl listened, feeling something unfamiliar bloom inside her. Hope that didn't feel fragile. Victor encouraged her studies, challenging her to think, to question, to imagine. He told her education was not an escape from her past, but a tool to reshape it. When she struggled, when old fears whispered that she didn't belong in classrooms or conversations, he reminded her of the day she had faced fear at the dump and chosen kindness anyway. That courage, he said, mattered more than any certificate. Slowly, she began to believe him. She spoke up in class. She helped others who were falling behind. She learned that leadership didn't mean standing above people, but standing with them. Yet change came with loss too. Some people from her old life drifted away, uncomfortable with who she was becoming. The girl mourned them quietly, understanding that not everyone could walk the same path at the same time. Victor never tried to shield her from that pain. He told her growth always demanded something in return. What mattered was choosing what was worth paying for. As she stood one evening overlooking the transformed edge of the city, lights glowing where darkness once ruled, she realized that her life was no longer defined by the dump, but by the choice she made there, a choice that continued to shape everything she touched. Years passed the way they do when life finally moves forward instead of in circles. The girl became a young woman, her posture confident, her eyes still holding the same quiet kindness that had once stopped her in the middle of a garbage dump. Education opened doors she never knew existed, but she never walked through them alone. Victor remained a steady presence, not as a savior hovering above her, but as a guide walking beside her, sometimes a step behind. He watched with pride as she spoke at community meetings, as she argued thoughtfully in classrooms, as she defended people who were too used to being ignored. She never forgot the smell of the dump, the weight of hunger, or the fear of being invisible. Those memories became her compass, keeping her grounded when praise and opportunity threatened to pull her away from who she was. The recycling center that replaced the dump grew into something more than a workplace. It became a symbol. Families who once scavenged in silence now worked with safety and dignity. Children who had followed their parents through waste now followed them into schools. The young woman visited often, listening more than she spoke, ensuring decisions were made with the people, not for them. Victor insisted she lead, even when doubt crept into her voice. He reminded her that leadership built on empathy lasts longer than leadership built on power. Watching her, he found a kind of peace he had never known in boardrooms or luxury homes. Saving her life, he often said, had cost him nothing. Letting her save his had given him everything. On the anniversary of the day they met, they returned together to the edge of the city. The land looked different now, cleaner, organized, alive with movement. But one small corner remained untouched. It was where she had found him, and she had asked that it stay that way. They stood there in silence as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and red. She thanked him then for believing in her when belief felt dangerous, for giving her choices instead of commands. Victor smiled gently and shook his head, telling her that gratitude belonged to her. He said that when he lay there among trash and shadows, it was her compassion that reminded him what being human meant. Without it, no amount of money would have saved him. As Victor grew older, his steps slowed, his voice softened, but his influence deepened. He trusted her with responsibilities that once belonged only to him. She accepted them carefully, never forgetting that power should be carried lightly. When he eventually stepped back, the transition felt natural, almost inevitable. People followed her not because of his name, but because of her integrity. She used resources to build schools, health centers, and programs that gave people tools instead of dependence. Each success traced back to that first act of kindness, multiplied 1,000 times. One evening, after a long day, she visited her brother, now taller than her, full of confidence and dreams. They talked about the past openly, without pain. The dump no longer haunted them. It had become a chapter, not the whole story. She realized then that her life had not changed because she found a millionaire, but because she found her own worth in a place that tried to strip it away. Standing on her balcony, overlooking a city that once ignored her, she felt a quiet certainty. Compassion had transformed her future, not by erasing her past, but by giving it meaning. And that was how a single moment, born among waste and despair, became a legacy that would outlive both wealth and memory, changing lives forever.